The Field Report is a part of the Amateur Radio Network. Thank you for listening to the Field Report for April 28th, 2017. We're going to talk about Antifa, who and what this is. And we just put a detailed list of what I've gathered from WeareChange and also some other bloggers. You know, since the changes since Donald Trump's inauguration, there's been a lot of information circling around about May 1st. And what I know so far is that May 1st is a significant day for a couple reasons. If you haven't listened to some bloggers and reports from WeareChange who's on the ground, most of the topics around this leftist militant group, of course, have been directed towards patriotic Americans, pro-Trump supporters, and any veteran or military person that would get in their way. They're armed. They are a leftist militia. They are well-funded. A lot of times they'll go ahead and recruit them off of Craigslist, and a lot of them they even have a 401k plan. But, you know, like our own military, we're supposed to pay for our military, and they're supposed to have a plan too. But this is definitely armed by a leftist militant Marxist group. That's what we know of so far, or they call them brown shirts. They're young, and we're going to show you some images here. This was some of the images that we're taking in Berkeley, California, pretty much, I think, about 2 weeks ago. And these are 20-something-year-olds. This guy was just cussing everybody out, and then he started lunging and this girl appears in there, and then they're lunging at this handicapped military veteran, and they just went on and on. I mean, and then you had the incident with the bike lock and that, and come to find out that incident that occurred was a professor. He was charged, and they have knives, and they are armed, and you know, I can see to a degree that you go into Berkeley, California, known for their historical history for leftist, progressive colleges, and just out a lot of the protests. But there's the other side of it, because they're not just famous for that, but they're famous for a bunch of other things. And, you know, now I guess they're famous for the Antifa. And what I've seen in these news stories and the protests is that they're engaged, okay, both sides. And they're not going to stand down. And whether it would have been in Coulter would have got there to go ahead and speak at the event, that event was canceled. But we saw what happened with Milo, and how all this other stuff came out, and Milo was shut down. And then you've seen the shutdown occur with Breitbart, and then the phasing off of other people that were involved in President Trump's administration in the beginning. And I guess what I look at is that because there's been so much happening in just a short amount of time, it's almost as if you throw all this stuff out there. And the one thing I support our president because he is our president. I don't know that I support all the decisions. And I know that a lot of people understand that you can still support your president and not agree, okay? But then this becomes a whole other matter, and this was all planned out, and people are kind of, I don't know, there's a lot of people that are saying a lot of different things, and I can see that point, okay? We have to be able to be more articulate and not throw everything at one man, okay? There are a lot of moving parts here, and that's one of the things I don't want people to overlook, because I do believe, because there is, many of the Obama holdovers, that is one issue. If you have one agenda and you can't even get two people to agree, much less 300 million, okay? And this whole thing was all brought on because they felt that they were cheated. And since that time, we saw Hillary trying to run as the New York mayor, but really hearing that Bernie Sanders came out and was outspoken about this Antifa makes some sense, that there's something not connected to all this. And that's where a lot of people come to the conclusion this is a Soros-funded group. And he, if you know anything about George Soros, and the ties to Zionism. I think that's why I didn't really fully get this, and now I'm, I guess, more informed that when it's funded by these outside groups, and outside when I say George Soros is not an American born citizen, and his story goes back to the time of the Holocaust, and seeing them dressed up and seeing that some of the other moving parts of this, it's a very political, and voting's one thing, being political is another. I've attended these events, and I would if I wasn't naive, if I was naive, I would want to listen to both sides. Here's the thing: now there's death threats and et cetera and on that you really cannot afford to be naive, much less neutral. So it makes more sense for somebody that's young and can get around. And WeareChange, that's what we're going to follow. That is going to be the live feed for some of you that do watch the Berkeley protests. I do believe it's going to, it was been planned out. That's what I've been hearing and reading from other various bloggers, and one in which I follow quite regularly is Gabrizola and Martin Brodell, and they seem to have a good handle on this. So I'll put that link and information and updates there. And there's another blogger that I've been following, and she's from Venezuela, and she's the one that was really, what she points that she made about Antifa, which I didn't really come around to this, but they are, in fact, very similar to the terrorist groups that helped light up what happened in Venezuela. I don't know that the United States is quite like Venezuela, but I could see some things that could fall in line with that. And if you're not familiar with the topic on domestic terrorist groups, looking at how many times these events exploded into a civil war, many people refer to what is happening in the United States as a civil war. There has been a political war. There's so many different groups, and it's so diverse. If you were to look at some of the live feed from WeareChange, a lot of the pro-Trump groups and the pro-speech groups, knowing what's going on with the pro-speech matter, shutting down speech, and then listening to Eric Schmidt on Google. If you follow David Seaman, he has now a new hour show if you want to look at that. He's following much of what the whole pro-speech, well, I'm going to say the whole speech issue altogether, and what the real agenda is to that. A couple years ago, we were watching the whole thing, that the story that just kind of was going really slow was with Google purchasing YouTube, and then this, things seemed to be okay for a while, and then suddenly, all of a sudden, these news channels were all getting demonetized, and I thought at first, like, okay, what is this really about? Because I don't have a monetized page, but then I'm wondering, why don't I? So we'll just do it the same way, Patreon and, PayPal and all that stuff, but we don't go to the events, and I don't know that I really keep up with the posts and the stories the way I used to, but I have to do at least something in regards of discussing Antifa, because it could happen anywhere, and this could blow up here on the East Coast. It could blow up, and we've seen this happen with Ferguson. Look at the pattern. In fact, if you go back to 2011, there was a caller that called into the Alex Jones show he was a St. Louis police officer, and he was very much concerned about what was going to happen in St. Louis before Ferguson. So look at that as your example. What I'll do is I will update it. I will also follow W77. He's always been on the ground at some point or another. I know it just takes you off guard because there's a couple things going on at once. There's been the issue of this rise of the Antifa. Also at the same time following the Pizzagate, Pedogate protests, and wondering where that would go. And then, of course, the official story that's going on in the media, and, just the overall issue of free speech. So obviously, this is what is in front of us, and I have to say, you can't just pretend that this doesn't happen. At least I know I can't. And following the other bloggers and updates, I think it's really significant seeing how the media purge is occurring all at the same time. So this is something to watch. Thank you for listening to the Field Report. Because I remember going up to St. Louis, and right about the same time, we were planning to go to the parade, that's when I was really doing a lot more traveling. And I went up to the St. Louis parade where the homecoming parade for the veterans. I was just not, I think most of us weren't sure what was happening, and we're still not real sure, or some of us aren't at least, but it seems like the bloggers that are following this are aware of what's going on. The Field Report is a part of the Amateur Radio Network.